Space is silent. No air to carry sound, no light except starlight, nothing but distance in every direction. And yet, again and again, the people who've actually been up there have come back with stories that don't fit that silence. Trained professionals, engineers, scientists, not the type of people prone to seeing things. And still, on 5 separate occasions, something out there made them question what they thought they knew. Here's what happened. Number 5. In the mid-1980s, aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery, one astronaut was floating near a window late at night when he noticed something in the dark outside. A faint, human-like shape with what looked like eyes and a mouth, lit softly by Earth's glow below. Everyone else on board was asleep. The cabin lights were dimmed. There was no one it could have been a reflection of. He froze, blinked hard, and looked again, and the shape was still there. Not sharp, but clear enough to hold his attention completely. He later wrote that it faded slowly over several seconds, the way a light dims rather than switches off. When he mentioned it to the crew the next morning, they suggested it was space debris catching sunlight at just the right angle, or simple exhaustion after days without proper sleep. He listened to both explanations. He accepted neither. Number 4. During one of the last crewed moon missions in the early 1970s, a photograph was taken of the lunar surface that, decades later, caused a stir once people zoomed in. In the distance stood a shape with the rough outline of a head, a torso, limbs, and a shadow stretching behind it, exactly as a standing figure would cast one. The astronaut who took the photo never mentioned anything unusual in his mission logs. It was only years afterward, once the full image archives were released to the public, that people studying the photos frame by frame noticed it. NASA's explanation was simple: a trick of light and shadow on uneven rock, the kind of pattern matching the human brain does constantly. But the proportions lined up a little too well for that answer to fully satisfy everyone who's looked closely, and to this day, no one has offered a more specific explanation for what, exactly, cast that particular shadow. Number 3. During the historic first moon landing in 1969, the crew reported something following their spacecraft on the way there. A light that shifted from red to white and back to red, pacing them for miles. It wasn't a star. It wasn't sunlight glinting off debris. It held a steady position relative to the craft, the way something under its own control would. Worried about how it would sound over an open channel, worried it might cost them their credibility, or worse, they described it in code instead, asking Mission Control where a detached rocket booster was, hoping that would explain what they were seeing. Ground Control checked and confirmed that booster was thousands of miles away. Whatever they were looking at wasn't part of their own ship, and it wasn't anything NASA could account for. It held steady beside them for several minutes, then slowly faded, and was never seen again for the rest of the mission. Number 3. During the historic first moon landing in 1969, the crew reported something following their spacecraft on the way there, a light that shifted from red to white and back to red, pacing them for miles. It wasn't a star. It wasn't sunlight glinting off debris. It held a steady position relative to the craft, the way something under its own control would. Worried about how it would sound over an open channel. Worried it might cost them their credibility, or worse. They described it in code instead, asking Mission Control where a detached rocket booster was, hoping that would explain what they were seeing. Ground Control checked and confirmed that booster was thousands of miles away. Whatever they were looking at wasn't part of their own ship, and it wasn't anything NASA could account for. It held steady beside them for several minutes, then slowly faded, and was never seen again for the rest of the mission.
Number 2. In the early 2000s, a solo astronaut on his nation's first crewed spaceflight reported hearing something impossible in the silence of orbit. A single, clear, metallic knock on the outside of his spacecraft. Then another. Then more, at irregular but deliberate intervals. Almost like a rhythm. Almost like a pattern. He sat completely still, listening. There was no debris nearby on any of the tracking systems. No mechanical vibration that matched. Nothing visible outside the window. Back on Earth, engineers took the report seriously enough to strike every panel and joint of the capsule with tools afterward, trying to recreate the exact tone he'd described. None of it matched. The leading theory offered was thermal expansion, the metal hull flexing as it heated and cooled, moving in and out of sunlight. He never accepted that explanation. To him, it didn't sound like a creak or a groan. It sounded, unmistakably, like a knock.
This is the biggest story. Give it room.
And number 1. In 1984, a crew of 6 cosmonauts aboard a Soviet space station reported something that still sounds more like a dream than a mission log. After a long, exhausting repair mission, the cabin suddenly filled with a blinding orange light. When they looked outside, they described 7 massive, glowing, human-shaped figures drifting alongside the station. Luminous, wrapped in soft mist, with wings that seemed to stretch for miles in either direction. The figures appeared to be smiling, radiating a kind of warmth the crew hadn't expected to feel in that moment. The vision lasted about 10 minutes before fading completely, leaving all 6 men sitting in silence, unable to speak for a while afterward. Soviet officials quietly filed the report away, attributing it to fatigue and psychological stress after a demanding mission. But years later, when the classification had lifted, the same crew still stood by exactly what they'd seen, describing the figures not as threatening, but as calm, almost welcoming.
Cosmic rays, reflected sunlight, exhausted minds in one of the most extreme environments a human body can be placed in. There are scientific explanations offered for nearly every one of these. And maybe that's exactly what they are. But it's worth sitting with the fact that these weren't stories from strangers online or campfire tales passed down for generations. These were trained professionals, hundreds of miles from the nearest other human being, describing, carefully, consistently, sometimes years apart from each other, things they never expected to see. If stories like this get to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And let me know in the comments which one of these 5 you find hardest to explain.